but if you look on the left-hand side there, you'll see as your education increases, so does your median weekly wage, and unemployment rate does go down. So as you're thinking about earning that associate's degree or continuing on to a bachelor's, master's, PhD level, it does usually mean on average that the income will raise and your unemployment rate will be reduced. Some of the colleges and jobs that are often popular for our students, this data goes back to last year on the left-hand side, with CLC being a very popular option for our students, University of Urbana-Champaign, DePaul, Milwaukee School of Engineering, Lake Forest College, Purdue, ISU. So you'll see here a mix of in and out-of-state schools, big and small, public and private. So our students kind of go everywhere. Certainly the Midwest is most common, but we have students going to different coasts, the South, and definitely considering all those options. On the right-hand side, this data comes from 2019, so it could have shifted a little, but you'll see some of those highest earning trade school jobs. Things like an elevator repairman. You might not consider that when you're thinking about the trades, or a radiation therapist. Dental hygienist is certainly a popular option. CLC does have a program in that. They have a plumbing program, they have an electrician's program through that JATC, and they do have HVAC as well at CLC. These are a few of the numbers. I just added this slide yesterday thinking about kind of as we learn about college admissions, some things that are sort of trending in this field. And it is a complicated field. A lot has continued to change and evolve as we kind of go forward. So applications to highly selective schools are on the rise rapidly, especially since COVID. They have skyrocketed, which ultimately leads to more students being deferred or waitlisted, which Ms. Rossi is going to give some more details to later on. But that adds stress. Students don't get to find out for prolonged periods of time if they're going to be admitted or not, which is a hard thing to do as a 17 and 18-year-old when you're waiting for an answer and you're kind of waiting endlessly. And you're told, yes, you'll find out in perhaps January, and then in January you're told, no, you're going to have to wait to March, or now it's going to be summertime before you get a final decision. Other things to consider are the colleges are seeing a high increase in symptoms of anxiety and depression on campus. I saw a stat last night that since 2013 to 2021, there's been a 135% increase in students reporting major depression. So just being aware of the services that are available to you on a college campus. Here at the high school, you have fairly easy access to your school counselor. You can chop in. At the college level, that process can be a little bit more complicated. It's certainly in a crisis situation, there is support available, but if it's I'm struggling with some things, I'm not necessarily at a situation where I'm going to hurt myself, some people are reporting up to 6 weeks before they can see a mental health professional, and usually they'll kind of give you 12 sessions before they refer you out to the community. So again, being mindful of the resources that are available, and if you need that support, maybe connecting with a private counselor as you go away to school would be something to think about. On the other side, what's kind of going down were acceptance rates at those highly selective schools, because applications are up, acceptance rates are down. So they're very competitive. In general, 50% of colleges admit more than 50% of students. So a lot of schools are very reasonable admission standards. Many of our students get in no problem. It's that category of highly selective schools that has become incredibly selective and complicated in the process. Nationally, we've seen a strong decrease in male students attending college. That's just something to be aware of. And then the follow-through piece after high school graduation. There's a kind of a buzzword or term called summer melt, meaning students have plans in place at graduation, and then say June, July, August hits, they start working, family situations change, and they drop off those plans and don't matriculate to the college or program that they were planning on, and numbers decline. So working and helping support your student as that process happens, making sure you're working with admissions reps to get them in the door. If they can get them there in August, I think the likelihood for staying is strong, but sometimes it drops off over the summertime. Kind of just a fun one to talk about. The IACAC is the Illinois Association for College Admissions Counseling. They host a yearly bus and plane trip. So one year it's a bus trip for counselors, the next year it's a plane trip. Ms. Rossi, who you'll hear from next, and I counted up last night, from 2018, 2019, pause for COVID, then this past summer, we've done 36 college visits together in 11 states. So it's been really fun to be on the road and hear from schools in Oklahoma and Alabama and West Virginia, Illinois, Missouri, others, Georgia, Mississippi. We've kind of done it all. So these are week-long college trips where we take a coach bus or a plane and then a coach bus, and we visit about 13 schools over 6 days with other counselors from Illinois, and we really get to see a lot. So Many people in this room might not consider Oklahoma City University. It's kind of a niche school, but for one of you, or one person every 3 years, that might be like the perfect fit. So as counselors, we try to take those visits. Miss Belmont, who's one of our new counselors, was on the trip. Miss Mitchell has been on several of those trips and was on a smaller bus trip this year. So many of us are doing those professional development opportunities to give that information back to you. As we've learned on these trips, there are some myths with college admissions, and these come from you as students, but also from the colleges. The idea that you have to pick one major before applying. 50% of students historically have gone into college undecided or undeclared, so you don't have to have a major 100% in mind to apply. Colleges only accept the best students. I'll never make it. We see students with all 5 grades on their transcript get into colleges, A, B, C, D, F. There are stories behind some of those lower grades sometimes, and we as counselors or you as the student can still explain that. If you've been largely an ABC student, but maybe something happened your sophomore year or that transition during COVID was especially hard, we can write a personal statement or kind of reach out to admissions and advocate on your behalf to explain what happened during that time. There's only one college that will make me happy. It is reasonable to expect that as you're visiting schools, you might find that one top choice and that dream school that is the right fit. However, that doesn't mean it's the only school that's going to make you happy. There could be others comparable that you haven't thought about or as you visit could be solid fits. That helps take some of that pressure off that one school admission, where if it is competitive and you don't get admitted, you don't want to feel totally lost in that process. There could be other options, or maybe you could look at the transfer path if that's the case. The idea that in-state colleges are always the cheapest option is certainly not true. Lake County, McHenry County, Cook County are one of the most recruited areas for students in the country, and many colleges recognize that we have a lot of talented students, and they're willing to give you incentives to come out of state. So our state, it's been a few years since I've seen the data, but at one point Illinois was second worst in the nation at losing graduates to out-of-state schools because we're an expensive state for in-state schools in general, and many students are going out of state to get that education. And I think our state recognizes the need to keep people here because that's a brain loss power. Like those students don't always come back, and that has an impact on our economy. So they're trying to make it more comparable in-state, but there are great deals out of state as well. And then the idea that all my peers have a plan, I'm the only one feeling lost. Yesterday, as we were presenting, and Monday, I asked the students just by a show of hands to show like who's super excited for high school to be wrapping up and kind of that transition. And most of the hands went up on some level, but then I asked the same question, who's also a little bit intimidated by this process or unsure, and the same hands went up. And that's completely normal. It's a little bit of both, and that's where we're here to help support them and also you guys as well as questions pop up. All right, some factors in finding the right fit. In terms of, this is the ultimate goal as you're identifying schools, is right fit for you. And everyone's gonna be a little bit different in that regard. So with location, the distance from home I do think matters. There are times where students, even at the start of their senior year, are pretty open to being really far away from home. But as that time for a decision comes in say April or May, the idea of that being 12 hours from home doesn't seem as great anymore. That 3 to 5 might be better. So for some students, being distant isn't going to be a big deal, but it does matter in terms of how to get home in a moment's notice. When I attended ISU, at any point I could take a bus, my parents could pick me up, eventually I had a car so I could drive home. But if I was 6 hours away, I couldn't do that at any time. You have to kind of plan it out a little bit better. What we mean by setting is just the setting of the school. So some students really love the idea of being in a city school environment, where others that intimidates them. They don't like sort of the hustle and bustle of the crowds. So they want that traditional college town experience. And then there are other schools that are in really small towns. Truman State University is a great school in Missouri. It's a pretty small school environment. In Kirksville, I love the campus. It's high quality education. The students loved it there when we visited. But it's a town that's about 17,000 people, and like the biggest shopping environment is Walmart, and there's maybe one downtown area with a couple restaurants, so you just have to know if that's gonna be a good fit for you or not. Lastly then, with the commuter campus, the idea of some of our students will go further away from home, but you wanna confirm when you're there, are most students staying on campus? Is it a residential environment, or are students leaving on the weekends or at night to drive home? This often affects our athletes that will go away, and then they come to find out that most of my peers are leaving at night or on weekends, so the social scene is pretty limited, so you just want to be mindful of that if you're considering going further away from home. The facilities, so everything from the dorms have definitely evolved since maybe we were in college. There's some great opportunities for quads now where you share a bathroom with 2 other roommates. The food options and dining centers, I think, are first class at a lot of universities, so making sure if you have special needs diet-wise restriction, or if you're just a picky eater, that you have those options available to you. What do the classrooms look like? Are they up to speed with the current environment and the current technology to make sure it's the best learning environment to get training that you're gonna need as you graduate? And then a popular question from our students is parking. They wanna know, can I bring my car to school? If I'm able to, how far from campus do I have to park? What's the cost gonna be? And then lastly, can freshmen have car? There are many schools that you can have your car as an upperclassman, but maybe not as freshmen, so you wanna ask that question. The size of the class, so what's the average class size? As we talked about the other day with the students, this auditorium fills about 300 or so people. At some big schools, there would be classrooms double, if not triple the size that you could be in. Many schools, the smaller schools, the largest classrooms that you'll attend is 50 to 75 people, and your average will be very similar to a high school setting. But at those sort of Big Ten feel schools, you could have a few classes that are lecture style that have 750, 1,000 students in them. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some people like that environment. It's not gonna be every class you take, but it could be one or two over the course of your freshman year. And then it's really gonna rely on you to be that independent learner and make sure you get to class and take good notes. So just being aware of average class size. The distance across campus, there are times where it's a really long walk from one side of campus to the other. When we visited the University of Alabama, which is an absolutely gorgeous campus, they had us on a bus to take us on tour because they're like, it's middle of the summer, it's 95 degrees, it's just gonna be too hard for you guys to walk from one side of campus to another, which would be a legitimate 30, 35-minute walk. So as you're picking classes, being aware of where they're at within the campus, so you don't have to walk across in like 10 minutes all the way across campus. And then lastly, those areas of like services, so tutoring, career planning, counseling. You are paying for all those even if you're not utilizing them, so making sure that you have access to those and you utilize those supports. Ultimately, the goal, I believe, of being a college student is to find employment, so utilizing career services to look for internship opportunities, to look at that resume, to find out job skills would really be a benefit to you. With major, as you're applying to certain schools, selectivity can certainly matter. Some schools, it's general admission. If they admit you to the college, you can sort of pick your major. Other schools, for example, the University of Illinois, which is very popular for our students, you are applying to a specific major or one top choice and a second, and it can have huge ranges for students depending on the major. Computer science, engineering, business at a lot of schools, nursing, tend to be very competitive and selective, so much so that there are schools out there that they've turned down computer science students with perfect SAT, ACT scores because the talent pool is so strong. So selectivity can really make a difference. It could also change the requirements for the school that you're applying to. They might require more math if you're in high school, or AP physics, or potentially more language while you're in a high school setting. Or as you get into the college, what your requirements to graduate are gonna be. Certain majors might require world language in college, and others won't. So that does impact your decision as well. And then finally, direct admit programs. So direct admit essentially means as you apply as a high school senior, certain majors at colleges admit you immediately into that major. An example or two examples would be the University of Iowa's nursing program, Indiana's business school. They're both top notch, but they are more competitive for admission. So you can apply. Some students will get directly admitted as freshmen and they know they have their seat for all 4 years, where others will be admitted to the university but not to those programs. During the first year, they will take general coursework, maybe in business or the sciences, reapply to that major for their second year, but there are no assurances of admission. So at that point, you have to make a hard decision. You might like the school quite a bit, but you can't get into your top choice major, so are you switching majors or are you transferring? So direct admit can really kind of be helpful if you're able to get into that pool. A couple other factors in finding the right fit. So activities, sports clubs, Greek life, internships and co-ops, study abroad, the diversity on campus, in and out of state, cultural diversity, that male-female ratio, how supportive of the LGBTQ community they are, political diversity on campus. We do like to list for students, if you're considering historically black colleges and universities, there's a great website, also Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. So again, as we send those out, those are something to consider as you go forward. Lastly, with costs, it really is a family discussion, and sometimes that public versus private sticker price are misleading, so we don't know true costs until you fill out the FAFSA and get all those forms submitted, which we're going to be talking about shortly. Thinking about grad school, if you're going away to grad school, you might have additional loans that you have to take out post-undergrad, so you want to kind of control that cost as your first 4 years, knowing that grad school could be a component for your next part of your life. And then really highlighting CLC. As we talked about, many of our students do continue on to CLC as a full-time student. CLC is really 2 programs within one. You can go the traditional route to attend CLC with the intent to transfer and pursue a bachelor's degree, but they do have about 35 programs that are career focused that are 2 years and into the workforce. So that's a great path for a lot of our students. And even though those of you that are in the room that are looking fully at 4-year schools, CLC can be an excellent cost saver. We have many students that will take classes this summer after they graduate or the summer after their freshman year for about $400 when that class might be triple that at the college that they're attending. I did put on the link there the CLC Scholars Program, which is an additional application. This is for highly competitive students, typically about a 3.5 GPA and around a 1200 SAT. If you apply to CLC Scholars and are selected, there is an interview component as well. It is free tuition, books, and fees all 2 years that you're there, so it's a great savings. All right, how to apply. So the college websites are still popular. As you've likely heard, the Common App is grown rapidly over the last 10 years, so there's about 1,000 schools now that are members of the Common App, and we can help students apply through that. Coalition App is a little bit of a newer program that's about 4 years old. It really hasn't affected many of our students. Most of our students use the Common App or the college website directly. We do ask that students fill out 1 transcript per lease form per college that they apply to. There's a link we're going to show you on the next slide that kind of walks them through that process. And there is a turnaround time. As you can imagine, with about 350 students as seniors, and some of those applying to 5 or 10 schools, that's a lot of transcript release forms. So don't wait until deadlines are approaching to submit those releases. You can always do it early. If we send your transcripts through Naviance to the college and you haven't applied yet, it sort of just sits in cyberspace until they have your application, and then they can download it at that point. So it doesn't harm you to fill out those transcript release forms early. There are a number of schools that are self-report for transcripts. Instead of having us send it on your behalf, you're going to put that into your application itself. And as you meet with your counselor for your senior meeting, we can print off your unofficial transcript for you to do that. We will ask, if you're doing the Common App, that you link your program with Naviance. Again, there's a step within the Common App and Naviance to do that, and usually it's easier to show you on an individual basis to walk you through that. With letters of recommendation, once again, through Naviance, you'll first talk to your teachers, but then you'll officially go into Naviance and ask them formally to send that, and then they upload it through Naviance and send it along. Again, this can take a couple of weeks. As you're well aware, your teachers are lesson planning, have other responsibilities, coaching, involved with activities. So if you give them about 2 weeks to write those letters of rec, that would really be helpful. And then finally, with test scores, this has sort of shifted a lot in the last couple of years. It used to be that you had to send an SAT score or an ACT score to colleges. Many colleges that our students apply to are now test optional. The website, fairtest.org, will list all those schools. And test optional essentially means it's within your rights to apply to the school without a test score, and they're gonna make an admissions decision based on other factors. Or if you're really happy with your score and you feel it fits in the middle 50% range of their averages, you can send that score along. What we try to make sure students and families recognize is that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. If there's 8 schools on your list and 4 schools are considered like safe schools that you're pretty much well in the mission range for, feel free to send that score. If there are 4 more competitive schools for admission that your score might be below their middle 50% range, you could choose not to send it to those schools. For a very small number of colleges, they will ask for scores for scholarship consideration, but in general, colleges are allowing for both. You don't have to apply to be considered for admission or for scholarship. Last slide for me just to walk through is the official transcript release form, again on our website. The link on the top there will direct you right to this. It's a fairly short transcript release form that basically says, do you want us to send these documents on your behalf? A couple last things with transcripts. At the end of the school year, you will fill out a senior survey, and it will ask you where you want your final transcript sent. So if you have a college that you've selected at that point, and many schools will ask, especially those highly selective schools, for a mid-year report. So in January, after grades are completed from first semester, fill out another one of these for those schools, and we'll send another transcript on your behalf. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Rossi.
All right, as we're moving on, we're going to talk about a lot of the frequently asked questions that you may have as parents or that your students may have in the college application process. So Mr. Goldman touched a little bit on the self-report application. So like we said, self-report is when students hand put in their grades from freshman, sophomore, and junior year. So they will come to one of us as their counselor and ask for their unofficial transcript, and then we suggest that they take a ruler and go line by line because a lot of the colleges do look at the accuracy of those grades. If something seems really off, that's a red flag and can be an automatic denial. Obviously, they know that accidents happen. Sometimes people misreport things on accident, but they will ask for a final transcript at the end of the year, and if things don't match up, it's a really bad thing. It's not a good mark on you. So making sure when you're self-reporting, schools like U of I, Purdue, ISU, all self-report schools, so they don't take an initial transcript right off the bat. A lot of kids will say, I don't know my College Board account, because when they send test scores to colleges, the schools most likely want the scores from College Board or from ACT. They will not take it from us as the school. So students will have to go into their College Board account and enter in their username and password, and then they'll have to go and send their scores. If they did not put these scores on their test when they were taking it junior year, they'll have to pay, it's $11 or so per school to send those test scores. We do not hold students' College Board accounts or information, so if your student does forget their username or password, they'll have to go through the process of a forget the password and then reset and things like that. Unfortunately, we don't have any of that information. If only one school on my list uses the Common App, should I use it? The Common App is pretty lengthy, so we would suggest unless you have 2 or more schools, then use the Common App. Otherwise, we would stick to that specific school's own application. The reason being is while the Common App is lengthy, it does make you fill out the application once for a number of different schools. However, again, if you're doing one school, it is a lot of work for just the one school, and a lot of times that college's application is shorter than the Common App. Should you ask for a letter of recommendation if the school is not requesting it? We would say no. The reason being is that letters of recommendation take a long time and kind of it takes up teachers' time, and there's a lot of kids asking for them. Specific schools will ask for a letter of recommendation, and then yes, it's completely fine to ask your teachers. Most teachers do not give letter of recommendations directly to the students. Everything is uploaded through Naviance. So if you think that you're gonna ask for 5 different letters and kind of pick out the one that looks best to you, that's not really how it works. So we ask that you pick somebody usually from one of your core content areas. Specifically, if you're going into a math field or an English field, then it would make sense to ask one of those English teachers or math teachers. If you don't need one, like I said, please respect people's time and don't ask for one. On Naviance, there is a letter of recommendation survey that we do ask if you do need a letter of recommendation that your students fill out that survey. It's just some detailed information about what they'd like to major in, what they've been involved in over the last 4 years, different things like that, so we can tailor a letter that best represents them and makes them shine. A lot of times we hear the myth that my senior year grades don't matter. So kids are like, it's senior year, I've worked really hard, I can kind of blow off, take some easy classes. Obviously, we don't recommend that. A lot of the schools, when you're filling out your application, will ask for the classes that you're enrolled in for senior year. So they look at that, and if for some reason you're on the bubble for that admissions, they will take or ask for your 7th semester transcript. So essentially, those are the first semester grades of your senior year. So everything does count, and we continue to encourage the kids. We talked to them when we presented to them this week that senior year grades really do count. If for some reason, when you turn in your final transcript and what you reported in the fall is drastically different than what you turn in the spring, sometimes they have taken back their admission status for kids and then later on denied. So obviously we don't want that to happen to anyone, so making sure that keeping on top of their studies is really important. A lot of the kids are asking, or parents are asking, when the students should start filling out their applications. As soon as possible. As we all know, everybody's busy, kids are in a lot of sports, activities, after school clubs, and it just starts to ramp up. So as soon as students can start filling out those applications, we highly encourage them to do so. It is time consuming. Sometimes we'll say reserve a weekend. Sometimes the Columbus Day weekend is big for a lot of kids. So setting aside that specific time to get those applications completed or setting kind of a timeline makes it less daunting for the students. If they have to think of everything they have to do at once, a lot of the kids get extremely overwhelmed, and then it kind of funnels on to you guys as parents. So it would be great to sit down and be like, okay, this weekend we're focusing on filling out the Common App. The next weekend we're gonna work on our essays. The next weekend we're gonna focus on teacher recommendations and kind of make little check marks down the road so it's not too overwhelming. So application deadlines. All schools have a number of different deadlines that students can adhere to. So regular decision is basically the time frame for submitting an application to college. Typically a regular decision time is usually a lot of times for school in a January or February deadline. Early decision is usually for highly selective schools, and that's for students who know, like, this is my dream school. I'm going here financially, if I can kind of swing it or not, that doesn't matter. This is my kind of do or die school. It is a contract and it is binding. So again, if finances are something that play into the picture for you or your student, and that kind of determines whether or not they can go to that school or not, early decision would not be the best option for them. Because with early decision, if you are accepted to that specific school, then you need to rescind all of your applications to the other schools that you have applied to. So again, it is a binding contract. One of the things that we recommend for most students is the early action or the priority filing date. And this a lot of times for most schools is November 1st, November 15th, or December 1st. For some selective schools, it can be as early as October 15th. With these priority filing dates, this is when the application is due. So November 1st is a big one. And a lot of times, many schools take a majority of their freshman class from this priority filing date. On top of that, it is the window where the most amount of scholarship is available to students. So that's why we're always encouraging the kids to get it done and get it in early. Rolling admissions is basically once your application is complete and submitted, you'll receive a response in a couple weeks whether you're admitted, deferred, waitlisted, or denied. And then open admissions is something like CLC or your community colleges. So as soon as you put your application in and submit your things, you're an admitted student to that school. So part of the decision process, everybody always wants to know, like, what are my kids being evaluated on? How are colleges really determining if my student is the best fit for their school? So most of the schools will say they do a holistic approach to the application process. So they're gonna look at GPA and they're gonna look at your student's rigor. So from freshman through senior year, have you tried to take some more difficult classes and been successful? It doesn't behoove a student to take a difficult class and end up getting a D or an F in that. So again, it's the most difficult classes that you can be in and be successful. SAT and ACT scores, again, with the shift in test optional or test free, those don't weigh as heavily on some schools. Again, there are a subset of schools that still do require those ACT and SAT scores. The personal essay and statement, this is the one that we always really want to highlight for students. This is where schools want to see something that is not represented on the student's application, something that's going to shine about them, something that's going to tell them something unique about you or how you're going to add greatly to their campus community. So it doesn't behoove you to go onto the application and have their student write down that you've been involved in 15 clubs because that's already on your application. Write something unique or a lesson you've learned or the reason why you really want to attend that school. You know, maybe there's a family lineage or something like that, or maybe there was a turning point in your life that made the student choose that school. They're looking for those unique things that aren't already represented in the application. Extracurricular activities and things are great. They always ask for those to see what you're involved in. I think, you know, jumping down to leadership experience, sometimes kids get caught up in, I have to be in this club, activity, sport, blah, 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 blah. They're not looking necessarily at the number of activities. Certainly they want to see kids who are well-rounded and involved, but they're also looking within those clubs and activities, have your students taken leadership opportunities in those clubs? They want to see, can the student be a leader? Do they have a voice? How are they going to contribute to our campus? Community service is a great thing, obviously showing that there's something bigger than the students and themselves. And then some schools will track demonstrated interest. So this is obviously something that's very school specific. And essentially that means anytime a student emails, does a campus visit, sends something in or communicates with a professor and anybody on campus, they will kind of tally and see how many times Johnny or Susie has communicated with the school, and they're like, wow, this student really wants to come. They've really put a vested interest in emailing and communicating, visiting, and all those kinds of things, and sometimes that weighs into the admissions decision for certain schools. Once the applications are submitted, there are a couple of different outcomes. Obviously, admitted means that you are accepted into that school, and then they wait and rely on you for whether you will accept their offer. Denied means, unfortunately, the student is not a fit for that school and the application will not be reviewed any further. Deferred means you may be asked to submit some additional information. So again, we talked about that 7-semester transcript. Maybe the student is on the bubble a little bit and they want to see some more information. Maybe they want an additional essay, or sometimes those 7th semesters, first semester senior grades, they want to see have they continued to improve and whether they're a good fit or not. And then lastly is waitlisted, and this means that they will not ask for further documentation and you're essentially on the line. So there's usually some kids above, and if those kids above do not accept that offer, then on the waiting list line, you are then admitted in. So, and that can happen all the way up till the summer before a student leaves. So if a student's really kind of hanging their hat on one school and they're on the wait list, there is a chance that they could get in. So financial aid, I know a lot of times this is kind of the biggest factor when we're thinking about college and how are we going to afford it, how are we going to pay it. And basically one of the things that we really highly suggest is speaking to the financial aid officials at the universities. They work with a number of different families with different circumstances, different changing life events and things like that. And so we always encourage you guys to talk to the admissions officials at the schools, because sometimes they may have a different scholarship or a different way they can help out the student if you're able to kind of communicate some information that maybe wasn't present on your FAFSA or something along those lines. So there's two types of forms when we're talking about financial aid. There's the free application for federal student aid, which is the FAFSA. This is an application that opens on October 1st. And that's the FAFSA website that you would go to, and it is a graduation requirement. So families either have to fill out the FAFSA form or they have to fill out the opt-out non-completion waiver, and those are on our Grays Lake Central Counseling website. We really highly recommend that everybody fill out the FAFSA. I know a lot of times people are like, well, I'm not going to qualify, I'm not going to get any money. Sometimes you may not get it through the government, but it can come through the school. So again, we highly suggest that every family fill it out just to see what might be out there for you. The CSS profile is another more in-depth type of financial aid. So some of your more selective schools will ask you to fill out a CSS profile, which dives a little bit deeper into your family financials and things like that, because some of these institutions will meet all need-based financial aid if you qualify. So paying for college. There's a number of different scholarships out there. There's a lot of national scholarships. As you can see off on the right-hand side, scholarships.com, FastWeb, College Board, Going Merry, CapEx. These are more your national scholarships, so the students are competing with a wide variety of schools or students nationally. Other scholarships that are available are ones that are more local through Naviance. So Ms. Marquardt, our College and Career Secretary, updates this kind of mid-September through April. And these are a lot of times, like I said, listed on Naviance, and you can select them by interest, by 2-year, 4-year, male or female, your GPA, merit-based, things like that. And it includes some national, but mostly local. The sad thing is sometimes we don't even have kids apply to some of these scholarships and they go unused because it may be an extra essay, it may be an extra letter of recommendation, and kids are busy, and so they just don't find the time. But we always tell them the little 500, 1,000, everything can add up to a set of books, your meal plan, any little bit and everything can help. So these are some of the scholarship myths. I'll give you guys a second to read over it, and then we'll kind of talk about how these are not accurate. Okay. So some of these busted scholarship myths are that many local scholarships are available to students with no regard to GPA. So I know a lot of times people think only the smart kids are going to get those scholarships, and that is not true. There's a lot of scholarships out there with very differing application requirements, so we do encourage the kids to kind of weed through each of the scholarships to see if they qualify. And a lot of times there's different parameters that you can put in that'll kind of narrow down the scholarship search. Out of the 100 plus scholarships that we will eventually add to Naviance, only a handful will be for athletes. I know a lot of times kids are like, well, I'm not an athlete, I'm not gonna get a scholarship that way. Again, a lot of them are for different activities, not necessarily just athletics. It could be leadership opportunities, it could be involvement in the fine arts, it could be involvement in your community service, all kinds of different things. So we really encourage kids to read through those and see what they would qualify for. Again, you know, I know kids are like, well, I'm never gonna get a scholarship, there's too many people applying for it. Again, like I said before, some of our scholarships go unapplied for every single year and the money sits. Okay, and we try to encourage kids to go after these. We send reminders and reminders and reminders, and it's just a time-consuming thing that they don't fill out. So just a little nudge from you guys as parents to help get those scholarship applications filled out. Again, scholarship funds can be used for gas, for books, for food. Every little bit counts. So, and we always tell kids, you have to play to win. If you don't ever try to fill out a scholarship, you're not gonna end up winning any. And what's nice too is for a lot of the local scholarships, those are presented at our honors night at the end of the year. So it's a nice little accolade for students at the end of the year to be recognized, not only for themselves, but in front of their peers. So we have a number of events coming up this fall to help support our students and families. We have college representatives that come to our campus every year, usually over 100 and some representatives. These are posted on Naviance, and they're at differing times throughout the day. So it's not always during 5th block or 1st block. So kids can sign up for these college visits. It's a great opportunity to have a conversation with the admissions rep, and a lot of times these reps are reading the students' applications. So it's important for them to be able to put a face with a name and kind of answer some of those questions that maybe you're not getting off the website. We're also having college application and essay workshops. We've done this for the last number of years, both before and after school. So a school counselor and an English teacher are available to help support students with any questions regarding applications, as well as essay writing. So helping with prompts, helping with revisions, because we encourage every student before they submit their college essays to make sure that somebody has proofread them, because one of the biggest kind of things that college admissions reps talk about is reading an essay full of errors. That's kind of an automatic like red flag to the admissions department. So those details about the dates and times and everything will be coming out shortly. We'll also be having evening counseling appointments. Mr. Goldman offers 30-minute appointments, so if you want to attend as a parent with your student and you have financial aid questions, or you're kind of just stuck on narrowing down some of those schools or questions on the application, you can email Mr. Goldman to set up a 30-minute appointment. We do ask that you email him ahead of time, not with the expectation that you're emailing this morning for an appointment tonight, so that he just has the availability to plan around his family as well. Some additional ones are a national college fair at McCormick Place. This is a huge college fair with 150 plus colleges that come and fill the place. It's free of charge, and it's from 11 to 3. So if you're in the city and this is convenient for you, again, being able to put a face with a name and meet some of those reps in person is really important. One of the more popular ones just locally is the October 13th CLC College Fair. Usually this is very well attended, and if you're kind of on the bubble or still trying to narrow down some of your schools, have financial aid questions, this is a great opportunity to speak face-to-face with those admissions reps. And then for any students or families that have a student with 504 plan or an IEP or any kind of special education needs, the Choices Fair will be held at Evanston High School. And again, this is a college fair, but it's specifically working with accommodating students, knowing what their needs are and being able to make sure that that school can accommodate those needs. So the schools that show up work very well with the Office of Disabilities in supporting students with needs. So we encourage you guys to follow the counselors on Twitter. Miss Marquardt, she's probably the biggest Twitter fanatic in our office, and usually being rightfully so that she's putting out a lot of our events. So she put our event for tonight, she'll put college visits, she'll put upcoming scholarships. So obviously if you kind of want to keep abreast of everything that's going on in the college world in relation to Grays Lake Central, that's a great place to be, as well as the other counselors as well. So now I'm going to introduce to you Emily from our ISAC Corps, and she's going to talk to you guys about financial aid.
So, hi everyone. My name is Emily. I'm from ISAC, which is Illinois Student Assistance Commission, or just ISAC for short. And today we're going to be talking about the financial aid process. I know it can be really scary and really daunting, so I'm just going to briefly talk about that and hopefully quell some of your fears. Okay, so yeah, here's my information. You can take a photo of this. And my email's on here, so any questions you have throughout, if you're filling out the FAFSA and you have a quick question, you can always email me or call me or text me, and within business hours, I'll answer. And literally any question, big or small, you can call and text me. Okay, so about ISAC. So here's our mission statement: providing Illinois students with information and assistance to help make education beyond high school accessible and affordable. So we're just the financial aid agency of the state, and we administer scholarships, grants, especially the MAP grant, and stuff like that. Okay, so there are many questions you have when applying for schools, especially financial aid. I know for myself, financial aid was so scary. Thank God I had my mom who could help me with everything, but there's so many questions you have about it, how much does college cost, how can I afford it, and what is financial aid, and when and how do I apply it? And that's what I'm here for, to answer those questions. So, college. When talking about college, we typically think about a bachelor's or just a four-year degree, but there's obviously a lot of different types of college. There's the vocational and trade school and associate's degree, bachelor's, and then the master's degree, which is the bachelor's and beyond. So, what is financial aid? Financial aid is money from various sources to help you pay for college. It makes college affordable, but the main point of it is to fill that space or to cover that gap between what college costs and what you can afford to pay. And yeah, it's money given, borrowed, or earned. So there's two big types of financial aid. There's the gift aid, which is money given, and then there's the self-help aid, which is borrowed or earned money. And then within the gift aid, there is grants and scholarships, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about. And then the self-help aid is federal student loans and federal work study. Federal work study is where you work on campus at your school and you earn money while working for the school, and you either take that for yourself or you put it towards your tuition. So here are the 4 different sources of financial aid: federal government, state government, colleges and universities, and private. So private could be your community, your school, your church, different stuff like that. So here are the must-know sources of financial aid. So ISAC, that's us, and then U.S. Department of Education. So I like to look at those little logos, and anytime I see an email from them or anything like that, it's important. So here are the big grants for 2022, 2023. The money changes each year. But right now, for the MAP grant, it is $7,200, and the federal Pell Grant is $6,895. And so it totals up to over $14,000. All right, so here are the ISAC grant programs. So these are the state ISAC grant programs. So first is the MAP grant, and this is the big one. This is the one everyone wants. This is a need-based grant. Like we said before, it covers tuition and fees and up to $7,200. Then there's the Illinois Veterans Grant. And with these, there are qualifying things, but if you think these apply to you, that's something you can email me or talk to me about after, like the Illinois National Guard Grant, or the grant for dependents of police, fire, and correctional officers. So if you think any of those apply to you, that's something you email me about, and we can figure that out. Okay, then here are the teaching programs. So you can get different scholarships for different teaching programs. And as you can see, they cover like tuition fees, stuff like that. It's important to note, though, that you should not apply for these if you're kind of like wavering about whether or not you should be a teacher. If you don't really know if you want to be a teacher, definitely don't do these, only because if you get one of these scholarships and you do not end up becoming a teacher, those scholarships are just turned into loans and you will have to repay them. But if you like know for a fact, like I really want to be a special education teacher, then you can apply for this scholarship or tuition waiver, but you do have to teach special ed for a certain amount of years. Okay, now on to the federal programs. So the Pell Grant, that's the big federal program, up to $6,895. And instead of just tuition and fees, that can be used for anything within cost of attendance, so like books, room and board, stuff like that. The Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, this is for anyone who lost a parent or guardian after September 11th in Iraq or Afghanistan. And then the Teach Grant, this is another grant that can be used for anything in cost of attendance. So if you think either of these apply to you, that's something you can come talk to me after. I'm not going to get into all the details today. We don't have enough time. But yeah, you can come talk to me after that. Okay, campus-based programs. So FSEOG, or the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, that is another grant which covers, that's need-based, but so it can go between anywhere from $100 to $4,000 depending on need. And then the federal work study, like I said earlier, that is when you work on campus and get money. So amounts are determined by college for anything in cost of attendance. So, should I consider student loans? So it's important to consider all your options when thinking about student loans. So to know the source of a loan, know where the money comes from, if it's federal or private, the interest rate, is it a variable or is it a fixed interest rate? When are you required to start paying? What are the repayment options? So a lot of times when you take out loans, it's different for grad school, but there's a grace period of about 6 months. So that is when you do not have to start paying back your loans. So it's important to keep that in mind too, how long the grace period is. And then subsidized versus unsubsidized loans. So when does interest begin to accrue? So this is important, like this slide. I would take a picture of this only because I forget a lot of the times the difference. So direct subsidized loan, that is need-based, and then unsubsidized is not need-based. That's just the big difference between them. But then for direct subsidized, interest is paid by the federal government while the student is in school at least half time, and then the interest is paid also during grace periods and during deferment. So the federal government is paying the interest. You're not accruing any more interest in a direct subsidized loan. But for the direct unsubsidized loan, interest is accruing and you will have to pay it back. It is not need-based. And yeah, like it says, a student is always responsible for paying the interest. So here's a chart of federal student loans. As you can see, like the direct subsidized is need-based, direct unsubsidized, and how it has different interest rates in the grace period. So the PLUS or parent or graduate loan, this is credit-based, unsubsidized, and has a higher interest rate, and then there's no grace period. So this is kind of like one of the worst loans because you have to start paying it back right away and a higher interest rate. So here's a chart about how much you can borrow. So for first years, second years, and then for graduate and professional school. So it also has, this is also a good chart that I would take a picture of too, because then you can know how much of your loan is subsidized versus unsubsidized. Okay, so here's just a chart about the overview of the financial aid process. So this is when you fill out the FAFSA or the alternative application. And then verification. Verification doesn't happen to everyone, but some people, it's almost random. It'll happen. It's just the financial aid saying, hey, can you verify this for us? Because you're putting a lot of like important information in it, and they just want to make sure it's correct. So that's something they'll mail, and you have to mail back a W-2 or tax records or something like that. And that's how you get verified. And then after you complete verification, then you can receive and review financial aid offers. Then you respond to colleges and then complete all pending processes. So how to apply? Like it was mentioned earlier, you can apply for federal financial aid with the FAFSA or the alternative app. So the alternative application was for eligible undocumented students and also transgender students. But transgender students can now fill out the FAFSA because the selective service question is completely removed from the FAFSA, so that's not important anymore. So here's the FAFSA, and application is available at no cost, first step in applying for financial aid. And it's important because some states use it to apply for state financial aid programs, and some colleges use it to award institutional aid. So here's the alternative application, also available at no cost, only for Illinois state financial aid. So if you're filling out the alternative app, you are not eligible for like the Pell Grant or other federal grants, only Illinois grants. So yeah, qualifying undocumented students, and college uses it to award institutional aid. So the 5 W's of the financial aid process: the who, what, where, when, and why. So who? High school seniors and college students. It is important that you remember you have to fill out the FAFSA every year. I forgot about that when I was in college, but it gets easier every time. It doesn't take that long once you've done it for a while. And then what? Financial aid applications. Where? FAFSA.gov, and then the alternative app is on ISAC's website. And then when? As soon as possible after October 1st. So it's important because like the MAP and Pell Grants are first come, first served. So if you wait to apply, the money could be gone and you just won't get any. So you don't have to wait like midnight on October 1st and then apply, but just keep in mind it's open October 1st and you should probably get on it. And the why, to determine eligibility for federal and state aid. So do you need parent info? Yeah, pretty much until the student is 24, you have to have parental information. Even if you don't live with your parents, or only parents should provide information on the FAFSA or alternative app. So in terms of FAFSA and filling out the FAFSA, parents are biological, adoptive, and step-parents, but step-parents can only be included on the FAFSA if they're married to the biological parent. So legal guardians, foster parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts, uncles, friends, other relatives, and other people claiming the student on their taxes are not parents in terms of the FAFSA and should not even be listed on the FAFSA. Okay, what if my parents are unmarried? So if parents are unmarried but are living together, report info for both parents. And then if parents are divorced, then you put the parent info, whichever parent the student lived with the most in the past 12 months. But sometimes it can be like they split their time equally. So that's when you would do the parent, whoever supports, whichever parent supports the student most financially. So here's the information you need. So it's important that you have like this stuff out while you're filling out the FAFSA, just so you don't have to go and find it, and it'll make the FAFSA completion a lot easier. So like federal tax returns, W-2s, and other records of income, banking statements, stuff like that. And then for FAFSA only, your social security number. And if a parent does not have that, they enter all zeros. Alien registration number or the FSA ID. We'll get into the FSA ID later. So what is the IRS data retrieval tool, or the IRS DRT? So it's an online tool that simplifies the process of reporting tax data by importing it directly from IRS onto the FAFSA. So it's not available on the alternative app, and it's basically just a tool. It makes it easier when you're filling out the FAFSA. You don't have to go in and input all the little information. You could use the data retrieval tool, which will then take your data and just input it into the FAFSA itself. Sometimes it doesn't work. It just makes the process a lot easier. So how do you sign your online application? So in order to sign it, you need an FSA ID, and with an FSA ID, you need an email, but that email should be your own personal email, not your school email, and it should be different than your parents'. If you don't have an email, you should probably make one, because each student and parents have to make a FSA ID, and then that is how they sign it. But if a parent can't make one, then all they have to do is print out the signature page, right, there's a wet signature, and then they have to mail it in. So it just takes a little bit longer, but it's still doable. So what is EFC? So that is Expected Family Contribution, or EFC. So it's a number generated by the FAFSA or alternative app. It is the amount a student and family can be expected to contribute in one academic year. Why does it matter? EFC is used to determine eligibility for most federal and state programs, and also for institutional aid eligibility. So what happens if I'm selected for verification? So like I said earlier, it's nothing to be scared about. It's just a common process. And then like I said earlier, you could be asked for W-2s, tax return transcripts, and stuff like that. That they're just gonna ask you to mail it back to the financial aid office. All right, so how much does college cost, or cost of attendance? So colleges create a budget that shows the full cost of attending the institution, known as cost of attendance, or COA. So there is direct and indirect expenses. So the direct expenses are paid directly to the institution. As you can see, it's tuition and fees and room and board. And then the indirect is not always paid directly into the institution. So that's also room and board, like if you live off campus or something like that. And then transportation, book supplies, and miscellaneous. All of these equal the cost of attendance. So the amount of aid depends on your financial need, and colleges will consider all available aid to try to meet your financial need, but it's not guaranteed. So how they determine financial need, that is the cost of attendance of the college minus the expected family contribution, that is the financial need. So this chart we use to show that all schools, despite the sticker price, they're all different depending on your EFC and your own financial need. So like it was said earlier, it's important not to look at the sticker price of a school and be like, oh, I shouldn't apply. Just apply anyway, because you never know how much aid you're gonna get. So financial aid offers. So after you fill out the FAFSA, you're gonna get a financial aid offer. So it's colleges will package available aid into a financial aid offer. And then this is when you review your offers to make an informed decision. And then you have to keep these things in mind when you review your offers. So what is the COA, or cost of attendance? What is your own EFC? What is your aid eligibility? Was your financial need met? And what types of aid are included? Is it gift aid, or is it self-help aid? And what is the out-of-pocket cost? So FAFSA tips and reminders. Fill out the FAFSA or alternative app ASAP after October 1st. Your information is confidential and only used to determine eligibility. Supplemental actions or forms may be required. That's verification, like we said. Keep track of deadlines. Keep copies of everything you submit, and then reapply every year. So this is the ISAC student portal. This is where you can find different stuff, just college planning, budgeting, and CapEx is on here, so that's the scholarships. This is just a really good source. I would definitely recommend using this. So it's isac.org/student-portal. And here are the trusted websites that we have listed. There's the student portal, studentaid.gov, FAFSA, and alternative app. So these are different numbers that you can call or text. So usually you pick whichever area code is closest to you. And then I also have business cards where there's a college Q&A, and they can answer some of these questions or anything like that. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks to Emily. And just to kind of add a couple additional points that I think are interesting related to financial aid, one consideration is the government moved to kind of what's prior. So I believe when you're filling out the 2022 FAFSA starting October 1st, you're going to be using 2020 taxes. So you're kind of like 2 years removed. Is that accurate? So in the past, it used to be the most recent year. Now it's prior. So you're going to be using 2020 tax information. A couple other things to think about are when this process plays out and you get accepted potentially in the fall semester, but now you're actually going to college in the following fall, you're not getting financial aid when you're accepted. You're receiving that information usually in February or March, so there is a timeline to wait. And ultimately, when students bring in their financial aid award letters to meet with us, what I'm trying to get out is an actual true cost for the student. So let's, for example, say $40,000 a year school, and that student receives $10,000 in gift aid, so scholarships and or loans. The family is going to contribute $10,000, so there's still a $20,000 balance. Often students will think, all right, like what else can I do to pay for that? If the family is saying we don't have any other resources to pay for it, the student, as Emily said, they can't choose to borrow more in their name. It's capped for that freshman year, about $6,500. The parents can fill out the Parent Plus loan application, which is based on credit score, but as you saw, the interest rate is much higher. It's 7.5%, and you can borrow up to that $20,000 if we're approved, but now the student has already put in, or you as a family have put in $10,000. The student has maybe borrowed $6,000 in their name, and now the parents are borrowing an additional $20,000 for just freshman year. Ultimately, I would argue that that's probably a school that we could look at other options to find a better value. Jerry Zabrinsky, Ms. Ross is a graduate of Lake Forest College. He's a excellent speaker on financial aid. He's been there for years and does a lot of these parent aid presentations. It's been about a decade since I've seen him speak, so it could be different. But he used to say about $30,000 in loans for the student in their name was a reasonable number that he would say families over the 10-year span that you have to pay those back is okay. If it's double or triple that, it's really hard. That's basically the cost of a small mortgage or an expensive car that you're paying back for a considerable amount of time. And I'm sure many people in this room are following the national news with the loan crisis, and people are just having a hard time paying these back. Financial aid has got complicated to the point that there was a news article, I think it probably goes back to 2019 now, that in this very area, families were signing over guardianship of their children going into their senior year to essentially less wealthy family members to get better financial aid deals. It came out in the Daily Herald, you can Google it. It was a big deal, so much so that U of I, who kind of first picked up on it, seeing some trends through their data, had to help advocate to change the state law so that sort of loophole was closed. So it is complicated. It is a family discussion. Certainly you have resources in Emily with ISAC, your school counselors. A couple of extra thank yous. Again, thank you to Emily for coming out. She came kind of as we put this program together, and to Ms. Rossi, Mr. Perez in the back there, but also Mr. Evans is our studio and theater manager. He sat through 6 of these, this is his 7th over the last 3 days, and he's always here at night helping out with all of our theater productions, so we do thank him for coordinating all the lighting, the screens, the online broadcast, so we just wanted to highlight him as well. And with that, we will open it up to questions from the audience, or as we move forward, individual questions as well. Yeah, no doubt.
Someone told me, and I just wanted to know if this is true or not, that any loans that you take out for school cannot be refinanced when the loans or if the interest rates drop.
I don't, this is where we can rely on the financial aid experts because it gets very complicated with the laws. Financial aid changes over quickly. Logically, that somewhat makes sense that that's accurate, but I would have to look into that further. I think the best advice that I've been given in terms of loans is if the family for those unsubsidized loans where the interest is accruing starting their freshman year, if you can at least pay off the interest and hold sort of the principal down, then you don't have that long payback eventually. But the interest for those unsubsidized loans starts accruing as soon as you borrow the money your freshman year. So that $5,500 is going to grow every year you're in college, and then you're going to borrow more for your sophomore year. So the refinancing piece is a great question. I don't know that I have a clear answer, but that's certainly something, if you want to send us an email, we could look into. Yeah.
Is there any difference between direct application to the schools through their websites and the use of the Common App with respect to acceptance?
No, definitely not. So many of the schools, if you go to the college website now, will automatically relink you to the Common App. It doesn't give you the option to apply through the website. There are some schools that just are exclusively through the college website. For example, if you're applying to CLC, they're not part of the Common App. All the public colleges in Illinois were required by the government last year to move to the Common App. So there's 12 public schools in Illinois. So if you're applying to those, honestly, I went to ISU, if you're applying to ISU and maybe a couple others, it might be far easier just to go through the website because it's a shorter application. But in terms of acceptance rates based on how you're applying, colleges have made it very clear that they don't have a preference. Yeah.
I just have a quick follow-on to that. So for the university, for the colleges like Indiana or U of I who have specific applications to their schools, like the School of Business, is there an advantage to follow that direct application versus the Common App?
So you're not filling out a separate application for the college specifically within the university, you're just declaring your major. So U of I, for example, asks you to declare your top choice major and highly encourages you to apply to a second choice. You can put general studies, but the way their admission process works, if you only put one major and you don't offer a second one, and they don't deny you or they don't accept you to that top choice, they have no other option but to deny you. Where if you say you're willing to consider general studies or that second choice major, so maybe if you're applying biomedical engineering but you'll consider physics or you'll consider biology, very much encouraged to do that second school. And same with Indiana. You might be listing your major. There's not necessarily a separate application. However, with many schools on the Common App is a general application, and there is one essay that up to 650 words. There's 7 prompts. You pick one of. That's for all schools. That was when Ms. Rossi was talking about writing about you as an individual. Many of those colleges, though, will have supplemental essays that are specific to their school. So U of I has a tell us about your interest and major. Northwestern has a why Northwestern statement. And that's where you want to be as specific to that college as you can possibly be. Yeah.
So when you fill out the fall sum,
Yep.
and you don't know where you're going to school, so it's just kind of, you fill it out, it's just in limbo until you go in and direct it to go to some school.
Good question. The question was, as you're filling out the FAFSA, if you're not totally sure of the schools on your list, I believe you can list up to 10 schools at a time on the FAFSA. So you might have 2 or 3 that you indicate that you want to receive it. And then say like November comes around and you have more schools you want to add, you can go back in and add those schools to your FAFSA. A college can't award you a financial aid letter until you've been admitted. So if you're denied, you're not going to receive a financial aid letter from that school. But you can fill out the document, and if you're not at a point where you know what schools you want to send it to, save, and then when you are ready, go back in and upload it to those schools.
Tell you if you get any money.
Not on the spot. That's a process school by school that you'll get an award.
Based on, you have to submit to at least one school to see if you get any money.
Yes, and the schools, again, the cost of admission at schools vary greatly. Some schools are in the 20,000s. There are many schools that are now in the 70,000 sticker price. So what your financial aid letter is going to look like can be greatly different based on the cost of admission and the family's financial picture. So you'll get those letters. Some schools might, when you're admitted, offer you a merit-based scholarship, saying congratulations, you automatically are eligible for a merit-based academic scholarship, let's say $18,000 per year. That's different from grant money, which is free based on need, not based on academic merit or scholarship money. So those could typically come more second semester to students.
So you basically got to know where you're going to school before you can get any scholarship or anything.
You have to know where you're applying. You don't need to know where you're going, but you need to know.
Yeah, right.
And the other part of it, and I know FAFSA, you're kind of in it now as seniors, but if you have underclassmen, sophomores, juniors, freshmen, each college is required on their website to have what's called the net price calculator. So if you go to the college admissions page for schools or their financial aid page, you can plug in some estimated data based on your family's financial picture and get a pretty good guess or guesstimate of what you're going to have to pay for. So you can even do that now as first semester seniors, because you might not get this information till February, March, or April. So it could give you an estimate of what you might be expected to pay as a freshman. Great questions. Others? Yeah.
In order to get official transcripts from the high school, do all your fees need to be paid?
No. I mean, I think in the past we've said that we won't send official transcripts after graduation until fees are due, but the state came out and said we can't do that anymore. So, as long as you fill out the form online. The process with official transcripts, so when you fill out that Google form, it goes to Ms. Marquardt, our college and career assistant. If it's not a Common App school and it doesn't require a counselor recommendation, she immediately sends it to our registrar who uploads it through Naviance. If it is a Common App school and a counselor rec is required, it will then come to us, we'll do our part, and then we'll forward it off to our registrar. So our registrar, Ms. Gargiulo, is actually the one submitting them online, But as you can imagine, as November 1st, which is one of the big deadlines, approaches, she literally could have a stack of 300 or 400 transfer request form. So you don't want to be at the end of that pile because it's hard to process more than maybe 50 in a day. So really trying to get those requests in early can only benefit you.
So, a four-year school requires an essay, all forms.
Nope. Yeah, so essays are very school by school. Same with letters of recommendation. There's no rhyme or reason to it. When you get into the application, you'll determine or you'll be able to see if they require essays or not. But it's very possible that you won't have to write any essays. U of I, for example, they require essays, but they will absolutely not accept letters of recommendation. Many schools have no need for either. They have too many applicants. Some of these schools are getting 100,000 applicants. They just don't have the manpower to read essays or letters of recommendation, so they're basing it very quickly. We have many students that have already applied to schools, and within 48 hours they're accepted because, for example, University of Iowa, Northern Iowa, Iowa State, which are the three public schools in Iowa, they have a formula to determine admission, so they're just getting their numbers, they're plugging into a formula. If you're good, thumbs up. Within 48 hours, you'll have your acceptance letter. So it's hard to talk in absolutes with college because they're very different schools. Yeah.
The Illinois, if you aren't unsure you're going to attend a school in Illinois, is there a difference between like do FAFSA for sure and hold on Illinois, or like, and it wasn't clear on should you fill both out?
The FAFSA piece? Yes, so I think the goal would be to fill out the FAFSA regardless of where you're looking at schools. If you end up applying to Illinois colleges and you're eligible for the MAP grant, which is the specific grant to Illinois students, there is a finite number of dollars available, so it does benefit you to apply early to that. And if you're eligible, you can receive some of that money. Some families aren't eligible. They just don't meet the need threshold. So I think you can indicate on there if there's maybe 2 schools in Illinois you're either thinking about and others out of state. But the FAFSA doesn't take into account academics. It's really need-based, so it doesn't hurt families to fill it out, even if you have a solid income that you don't think you're going to be eligible for. Sometimes circumstances change. There's loss of job. Heaven forbid someone passes away. As long as they have your access to your information, they can work with families to try to accommodate in those situations. Yeah?
So from what I've understood in the tours that we've just recently done with my daughter, some of the universities are offering scholarships that are within the college that they might attend.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the merit scholarships they might get just for applying.
Yep.
Is there a simple way to identify those, or is that dependent upon the university? Like, do those come through Naviance or anywhere, or is that?
No, so great question again. So sometimes you'll get a merit-based scholarship through the admissions office for applying and being admitted, and then there are departmental or college-based scholarships. So the College of Business might have additional. I think really there is no easy way to identify that. The best way about doing it would be looking at the college websites and talking with your admissions rep for that school, because they can point you in the right directions. Again, at the smaller schools especially, admission reps are very hands-on. They're the one reading your application. They're probably your financial aid liaison. They will meet with families in the Grays Lake area. I've had admissions reps talk about meeting with families at Panera or Something's Brewing and having that sit-down conversation. So absolutely, that was an option. At the bigger schools, they work with more students, so that hands-on contact can be a little bit more challenging. But I would definitely work with the Office of Admissions to identify those scholarships, and those can be valuable. It might be a $500, $1,000 additional support. College admissions has changed. It used to be once you made that choice on May 1st and kind of told the school that you were coming, other schools would respect that and kind of back away. There's been a shift where the government has said, like, it's sort of an open market. If they want to call you May 15th and say, we have an additional $5,000 for you if you come here, that's within their rights, and a student can consider that offer at that time.
One more quick question.
Yeah.
So would it benefit, so my daughter's looking at a specific area of interest. If she has questions about the programs offered, would the admissions rep be the right person to start with, or would contacting like the department at the school be a better?
You know, I think as you get further along in the process and it really becomes a consideration that this is what a top 3 school of mine, I do think having a visual representation, like being able to see that department on a campus tour, especially if you're traveling further away, if it's a campus that you're taking a flight to go see, I would try to work with admissions to make sure you're seeing someone within that specific college, because you know, going and seeing the engineering building and what they have access to kind of brings to life the experience. Admissions reps are great. Many of them have worked for these schools for a long time, but they are generalists. They kind of have an overview of the school, where those departmental like chairs or professors can really give you the ins and outs of what it's going to look like on a daily basis. For example, University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee has a wonderful engineering program, and what's unique about them at UWM is their advisors are engineering specific advisors as opposed to like general class advisors. So that's a more hands-on approach where they know where their students typically struggle their first 2 years, and they can kind of accommodate based on that. So having that sort of intimate discussion with those departments can really bring to life like, what is my experience going to be here as a student? Sure. I do want to just switch one more slide over, and we can keep asking questions. This is just a QR code, so if you have a phone, you can just kind of put it up there, and it will give you a link. There's like a 4-question survey just about some of the information we presented tonight. We are all ears on feedback. If there's things that we can do to make this process easier for you or information you feel you need, please feel free to share that. Otherwise, again, you can keep firing questions off or come up individually, and we're happy to answer any of those. Thank you for coming. Last year we presented to an empty, it was still COVID, so we presented, Ms. Rossi and I, to an empty arena or an empty theater, just to a screen, so this is great.